Episode 1 of Multifamily Investing with Bob Biggins. My wife and I are real estate agents in Southwest Michigan, and we get asked by a lot of investors, how do we do this, or how do we do that, or what does it take to do this, what does it take to do that, because we're investors ourselves with 70 doors and counting. A friend of ours said, well, you ought to look at podcasting. And I thought, this was probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I thought, I don't want to do that. I don't have time for that. I don't want to do that. And the more and more I get questioned, I retired from my job about 2.5 years ago. And my W-2 job, real estate allowed me to do that. And I thought, well, maybe it would work. And so as I've been more and more active in our rental property business and real estate sales business, I've had many inquiries from many new investors, mid-level investors, and they want to know several things, such as collections, maintenance repair, what softwares to use, and several different areas that my wife and I are just second nature to us because we've been doing this since 1996. So I thought I'd put together my first podcast, and this is just going to be the first episode, and it's just my story of how I started. Came from blue-collar town, blue-collar parents in Ohio. I went to college north of Pittsburgh and moved out to the Midwest to work at a steel mill, steel processing plant in LaPorte, Indiana. And from there went on to work at a steering column company as an engineer in a small town in Michigan. Moved out to a position with a brake manufacturing company in a small Michigan town, and upon getting my footing, I thought, well, why don't I buy a duplex, because it's a whole lot cheaper to live that way. And in doing so, I began my real estate investing career. See, I wanted to move up in the corporate ranks fast. I wanted to move up, and industry just wasn't fast enough for me. I played high school and college sports, football namely, and everything was about action, moving fast and getting it done. And I didn't see that urgency in industry. And so I needed something that was going to meet my fast-paced younger life, and that was real estate. So I bought a duplex and didn't know much about fixing things up, about maintenance, about capital expenditures. I just didn't know anything. I created my first lease agreement, and it was 3 lines. This is my name, I will pay rent, and this is what date it's due. And that was it, because I had no clue what to do. It was 96. There was no YouTube. There was no Facebook. There was no teachers. There was no mentors, at least not that I knew of. And so that was my first duplex. Lived in the bottom, rented out the top. I knew I wasn't doing it right, and I had nowhere else to go. And I would sit in the evenings and watch television, Saturday Night Live and such, and I saw No Down Payment course with Carlton Sheets. And I thought, this makes sense. And so I bought the course. At the time, it was probably $200 or $300, and that was a lot. It was 12 CDs, came to the house, and I was hooked. I would listen to these things over and over, day in and day out, working on my place that I lived in and learning how to do maintenance. I look back on some of my old workmanship, and it was not pretty, but it was a new person getting started. And I would listen to these CDs over and over, probably 50 to 100 times I listened to all these 12 CDs. And one of the big takeaways was it's not that much harder to do more than it is to do small, to be a larger real estate investor or a smaller real estate investor. Took that to heart. So I went back to my company and I started talking to people and, hey, would you ever want to be a partner? We were want to be a partner? And sure enough, I got a partner within a couple months. And we bought a couple of duplexes together, then we bought another duplex together, and this is probably 98. And then 99, we bought a 9-unit together, and then we bought a bunch of single-family houses together, and then we brought a third partner, and we bought other things together. And at the time, then I bought a 6-unit at the time, probably up to 20, 24 doors in a matter of 3 or 4 years. I thought things were going good. highly leveraged, lots of maintenance. These are older buildings in Western Michigan, usually 100 years old, because that's just what is around. There's not a whole lot of new construction. So they all needed rehab. And so the early 2000s was spent just rehabbing properties and doing capital projects of siding and roofing and just everything under the sun. At which point my business partner learned that he and his wife were gonna have triplets. I said, hey, why don't I just buy you out, because you're gonna be busy. And I had young children at the time. I said, I've got a kind of a crew of guys who've been working with me. Would you wanna sell out? And I was like, sure. So I bought him out of all the properties, and then I owned all those myself. At the same time, I was going to school for, at that point, my doctorate. I got a double major, so I got 2 bachelor's degrees. My first job, I went and got a master's degree, and then working more in engineering and technical, went and got my master's in engineering, probably in 2000. Then decided, for whatever reason, while doing all this stuff, I need to get a doctorate degree. So I started working on that around 2001 and finished in 2009. My company was paying for it, so I just went along with it, was doing working, education, starting a family, and working on my properties and multifamily investing. That was a pretty busy, fun life. Kids were young, born in 04, 06, and 08. And we were just, things were going well. 2008 came around, and the markets just went to heck in a handbasket. I wasn't too terribly leveraged at that time because things went up in value, and I bought 10, 12 years earlier, so I was okay. And so I was in a pretty good position with a full-time engineering W-2 job. So I think I bought 2 duplexes in 06. What I thought that at that time was a high dollar amount. But then in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, things were on fire sale. Things were half price. So I was able to buy several properties at that point. One of them got bought out by a local drugstore. CVS bought it out, and I got paid 4 or 5 times what I bought for it. And that allowed me to 1031 exchange into a 5-unit and pay that free and clear with the proceeds. And so that really started the cash flow really starting to stack up to anything comparing to my job. That would have been probably 2012 or 13 or 14, somewhere around there. And then I started watching all the house shows and thought, this flipping. At that point, I was probably, I was over $1 million in debt. And at that time in 2013, 14, or 15, that was a lot of money. And $1 million in debt. And I thought, I had to work on paying this stuff. How can I do that? Being quite handy, had a good crew of construction subcontractors, went ahead and sold one of my properties I really shouldn't have sold. Almost anything I've sold, I shouldn't have sold, but I did sell a very nice duplex and bought a single family. And for the years of 2017, 16 through 17, flipped that right down to the joists. Floor was gone, roof was gone, side was gone, everything was gone. So it was basically a brand new house. And that turned around, made a very tidy profit after about a year or so. And then that allowed me to pay off some debt. Thought that worked out well. So was able to leverage, and I bought 2 more flip houses. And I had people rented them for a year or better, because in that way I had short-term capital gains versus long-term capital gains. Anything over 1 year is short-term capital gains, or long-term capital gains rather, about 15% taxed. And at the time, short-term capital gains was at your rate of your salary, your W-2 job, which for me would have been way too high. So we rented them, turned around, flipped them in a year or so, and had a nice tidy sum there. Kept paying debt down and bought another pair of flips and flipped those. And so that would have been probably through 20, 17, 18, 19, and 20, I believe. And then while doing my last flip, I heard this character called Ken McElroy. I just stumbled upon it on YouTube because they're the internet and YouTube at that time. I was using them at work, but wasn't really using them for education much, or for training, or really entertainment, because it wasn't so much of a thing in 2018, 19, and 20. It probably was for some, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is today. I started listening to multifamily investing. And Ken at the time had 8,000 doors. He today has 10,000 doors. I call them doors, not units. I would always call them units, but I learned the pros call them doors, how many doors you have. And I listened to that and thought, wow, that's great. And I listened to another episode. Wow, that was great. Another episode. And I was hooked. I listened to probably 200 or 300 of his episodes. Well, in doing that, he would have guests on, which I plan to have guests on my podcast as well. And like long form podcasts, because I'd put them, at the time, I guess I didn't even have ear pods, or maybe I had the corded ear pods, and I'd work on a property, or I'd work around the house, or I'd work on the computer or whatever, but I would just take in all his content and learn. And he would have guests, and these guests would dovetail out, and I'd start watching their podcast, and then another guest would be, and then a guest from their guest would be another podcast. So I've got about 5 or 6 podcasters I listen to every week, all their content religiously. It would be the Ken McElroy, Grant Cardone, Rod Cleef, Michael Blanc, the real estate guys, RPOA out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, to get a local or regional twist. And see if there's anyone else. Jake and Gino. They were probably the second or third ones I really started listening to. So I still listen to all these guys religiously. And as Rod Cleef would say, I work to do what people I know, what they think is hard is easy. So my mind has totally shifted away from doing a duplex or a fourplex or a sixplex, and now I'm more like 24plex. I'm thinking about a 50plex. I'm thinking about 100 doors at a time, 200 doors at a time. So it changed my mindset in a way that I hadn't done in the previous 25 years of doing real estate, from about 96 to 2019, 2020. So 24 years, I thought small. I thought like a W-2 employee. And once I started taking in their content, like they say, it's the 6 inches between your ears. That's the hardest thing. That's the hardest hurdle to get over in doing multifamily, because it seems like an immense, huge endeavor. But it's just like anything. You eat an elephant one step at a time, one inspection, one loan, one maintenance project. You just do them just one step at a time. And there have been deals since that I looked at in hindsight, 2020, and I wish I would have bought them. But I was scared. I didn't have the confidence. Taking in all this content and becoming more and more educated, you build your confidence. And that's the muscle you need to build up, is your confidence muscle. Because to get into this game in a big way, you gotta have huge confidence. Now, to get into it as buying a duplex, where I was 25, 30 years ago, buying a duplex, buying a quad, that's new to people as well. And those are the people, a lot of them who I've been answering tons of questions, and I'm doing a lot of this podcasting for, because they're just starting out. I don't want them to have to go through 25 years of doing it almost haphazardly, compared to doing it in a very predictable, very organized manner. And that's what I'm trying to prevent people from making the mistakes I made. That's why I'm primarily doing this. My wife and I are agents, and so we generally say, if you do anything locally with us, we'll teach you everything we know. You just buy a deal with us, and we will represent you, and we will do everything we can to make it the best deal, the best experience you can have with multifamily, or residential, of course. But multifamily is really our sweet spot, because we've been doing it for almost 3 decades. And at this point, we're getting pretty darn good at it. Upon my mind expanding, turned around, and was probably 2022, 23, I bought an 8-unit, and that was actually an apartment complex building. Within the due diligence period of that, or the buy-sell of that, which When you do residential real estate, you have a buy-sell agreement. When you do commercial real estate, you have a purchase and sale agreement. Now, if you buy commercial real estate through the residential channels, you still use the state-mandated buy-sell agreement. Whereas if you're doing a deal with a broker, you use a legal document called a purchase and sale agreement, and the buyer or the seller can develop that, and then each attorney goes over it, and then you're in essence making the buy-sell agreement as is residential in multifamily or in commercial. So that deal was through Association of Realtors or through the MLS, and about an 8-unit. And then as I was going through my due diligence, I had the opportunity to retire from my job as an engineer. And at this point, I was very, very interested in that because I wanted to excel in real estate anyhow. And so I took advantage of that, gladly accepted, and moved on and started, did the closing on the 8-unit in a neighboring town. And I was on my way to buying bigger and better deals. And it was a huge value add. Value add, as you can imagine, is you buy at a low price and you drive the rents and values through improvements. And we've turned 5 of those 8 units now. 6th one's coming open, and this is like 2 years later, 3 years later. It's coming open soon. And we'll turn that one. And so a year goes by, we buy a 10-unit. A year goes by, we buy a 6-unit and a single family. That was a good deal. And then most recently, I'm very close on a 14-unit in a neighboring town. So as you can see, every year I try to buy one, bigger one, bigger one, bigger one all the time. And there's all kinds of methods that I'll discuss on the channel, such as cost segregation to limit your tax liability. Many residential people don't know about that. Many CPAs don't realize what that is. Many CPAs don't realize it, but it's a very specific real estate term, which is basically accelerated depreciation, and that helps your tax basis, actually helps your tax liability quite significantly. So that's pretty much my story. I've been doing this for a long time. I get multiple questions per week. We represent a lot of real estate investors. We represent a lot of real estate investors who want to be, and some real estate investors who want to be bigger real estate investors. So we are not only selling, but we're doing. We're becoming bigger real estate investors and just expanding that courage muscle by buying bigger and bigger deals, up to, at this point, 7-figure deals. So I think I'm going to call it a close. Thank you for tuning in to my episode number 1 of my story, or how I got to real estate investing. And I will be working on future episodes. We'll be talking about other issues that I get questions on all the time that I won't have to explain it a second time. I'll say, oh, just go to episode number X. Look on there. I give you a 10 or 20 minute talk on exactly how to do this. Oh, really? And that's one of the main reasons, just to help people. I want other people to be involved in real estate because it's been very good to us. It's not for the faint of heart, and doesn't happen quickly. It happens long over time. But it's been good, and I want other people to benefit from it. And the quickest way to scale and to build up, and a lot of people, they just want to leave their W-2 job, which I totally understand, is to get that courage muscle going and just learn, so that later you can earn. Thank you. Have a good day, and signing off.